Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our next event in the Hoodwinked series. I'm Ray Walker, and I'm with the Oklahoma Insurance Department. I want to remind everybody we are a state agency. No, we don't sell any insurance products or anything like that. Our job is to regulate the insurance industry here in the state of Oklahoma. We try to make sure that the carriers that do business here are financially sound and they're set up properly to do business here, as well as providing a place for beneficiaries and for constituents to come when they've got questions about their insurance. If they're having a problem getting a claim processed, or they've received some sort of denial letter or something like that, we provide an opportunity for people to come and get those questions answered. So please don't hesitate to reach out to the Oklahoma Insurance Department if you do have any questions like that. You can also go to our website, which is oid.ok.gov, and there's places on there where you can get your questions answered, as well as to ask questions. You can go, and if you want to file a complaint, there's a way you can actually fill out that form right there on our website. So take advantage of that. Now let me tell you a little bit about the program that I'm with. I'm the director for the Medicare Assistance Program, and we're a grant-funded program within the Oklahoma Insurance Department. And our role is to assist beneficiaries with their questions about Medicare. What is Medicare? How Medicare works? And what are the different products that are available with Medicare? And we have another grant that provides us with funds to answer questions about Medicare fraud. What is Medicare fraud? How can you protect yourself from becoming a victim of fraud in the Medicare system? And we also, for those people who think they may have been a victim, we can help them sort out what they need to do in terms of reporting that fraud and how they can protect themselves. And that particular grant is known as our Senior Medicare Patrol grant. Lastly, we also try to help people who are in those low income brackets, people who are having to make decisions about whether they're going to buy groceries, pay utilities, or if they're going to pay for their prescriptions, because as we all know, they could be very expensive. So we want to find those low-income seniors who might benefit from an assistance program that will help them pay for those prescriptions, as well as their monthly premiums for their prescription drug coverage. So anything related to Medicare, if you'd like to talk to someone to see if there's some way we can assist you, our phone number is 1-800-763-2828, and someone answers that phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So please feel free to reach out to us if you've got any questions. You can also go to the website, the same OID website. You can cut a corner if you go to map.oid.ok.gov, and that will take you to our website. But one more time on that phone number for the MAP program is 1-800-763-2828. So let's go ahead and move forward with our presentation for today. I'm really excited. This is a friend of mine who's been doing these conferences with us since the very beginning, and we've done these for, gosh, I don't even remember how many years now. And Jennifer's been a part of those since the very, very beginning, and I've learned so much from her. I'll be honest with you, I did not even know that Oklahoma had a Department of Securities, and lo and behold, we do. And I figured, when this first started, that I really didn't need to worry about this because, it's securities. I don't have any money, so why would anyone be after me? I have since learned that anyone in any income bracket can be a target, and that we all need this information. So I'd like to introduce to you Jennifer Shaw. She is an enforcement attorney and coordinator of investor education outreach for the Oklahoma Department of Securities. Jennifer joined the department in 2003 as an intern, and after passing the bar exam in 2005, she started working in her current role. Jennifer has an accounting degree from Southwestern Oklahoma State University and received her Juris Doctorate from the University of Oklahoma College of Law. She was assistant managing editor and note editor of the American Indian Law Review. Jennifer is a member of the Senior Outreach Project Group for the National Association of Securities Administrators, so NASA. This project group was responsible for the development of NASA's Senior Safe Training Program and received the NASA Outstanding Team Service Award. The project group has also developed a law enforcement training for elder financial abuse and training for the economic empowerment of women. Jennifer joined the board of the PIABA Foundation, which I looked it up. It stands for Public Investors Advocate Bar Association, in 2019. Jennifer has volunteered as an education director and director of the American Legion Auxiliary Oklahoma Girls State Program for 16 years. So Jennifer, thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you for the introduction, Ray, and everyone, thank you so much for joining. It's always fun to participate in these, and I just look forward to it every year. As Ray said, we've done this together for a long time, so I'm very glad that you are here with us today. I'm going to share my screen and get to some slides so we can learn a little bit together about securities and how this may impact you. As Ray said, you may not think it will impact you, but it easily could. So again, we're the Oklahoma Department of Securities. I have to give a slight disclaimer. The views expressed today are my own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the department or the Oklahoma Securities Commission. Now let's get started. What we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk a little bit about what exploitation, senior exploitation and abuse is. Some different investment schemes and scams that may affect you and that we see daily, give you some information and protection, just how you can help yourself. And then if you do have a friend or a family member that you think may be a victim, how to report that. All right, a little bit about the Oklahoma Department of Securities. Our mission is investor protection through administration and enforcement of the Oklahoma Uniform Securities Act. This act prohibits fraud, promotes investor education, and requires registration of investment advisors and representatives, broker-dealers, and agents in securities. So kind of what does that mean? That basically means that if you have somebody that is trying to sell you a security, they have to be registered with our office. The securities themselves have to be registered or exempt with our office as well. So one of the reasons we require those investment professionals to be registered is because we also go out and our office does exams of those to make sure that what they're doing with your account is legitimate, that they have all have certain standards that are there to help you, suitability standards, different standards that they have to do with your account, and we are out there making sure that they are meeting those standards. We work in conjunction with the National Securities and Exchange Commission, with FINRA, which is the self-regulatory agency of all broker-dealers and agents. We work in conjunction with them to make sure that securities laws are being implemented correctly throughout the state. So let's talk a little bit about exploitation and abuse. So senior exploitation, a very legal definition here, is the unjust or improper use of resources of a vulnerable adult for profit or advantage. So that basically means if somebody is taking advantage of a senior, using their money for things that shouldn't happen, and this is not just a senior, but it also could be an adult that can't take care of themselves. There are regulations and things to prevent that. But if you notice that exploitation in Oklahoma, you're also required to report that. And we'll talk about that later. A fact that I have found while researching this and doing a lot of things, there was a paper that came out a couple of years ago that the estimated financial exploitation cost to Americans is $36.5 billion per year. That's $36.5 billion that it's costing people. One of the main targets, obviously, the exploitation and abuse is seniors. And so now we're just going to talk a little bit, you probably already know part of this information, but why the seniors are the target of fraud and exploitation. One, a lot of times it's because seniors have more assets to exploit. You've saved that money. The seniors, I keep saying seniors, but we can use whatever term you want to. But as older Americans who've earned the right to retire, you have saved money and saved money. And so you have those assets that are available. And sometimes they think those assets are easily available to exploit. Sometimes you're just more trusting of strangers. You grew up in maybe a different time that you could trust people. And sometimes now we're all learning that sometimes you can't trust everyone. With the pandemic, we have all realized that social isolation is a big occurrence. And a lot of times our senior population experiences more social isolation. You're more likely to be home. This was even prior to the pandemic. a lot of times seniors aren't at work all day, or they're not, some people are out volunteering, but sometimes you're just more likely to be at home and easier to reach for a scammer. And sometimes, whether we like it or not, as we age, there's potential for impairment mental impairment that could affect your financial decision making. So these are the main reasons that seniors are a target for fraud and exploitation. Some other vulnerability factors for the senior population: you may have a financial responsibility for other family members. You may be responsible for helping raise a grandchild, for helping pay for your spouse's medical care, something that you feel like you may need just a little bit more money. You have pressure to share assets or change your will or trust. Maybe you've had somebody that's started pressuring you. Hopefully it's not a child, but it could be that they want you to share your assets or change that will or trust so they might recover more. Somebody in your life is doing that. One of the things we see in a lot of our cases, and we'll kind of talk about this too, is you might have recently lost a spouse or partner and just be grieving from that loss, very understandably, and that will make it harder, possibly make you more vulnerable for financial decision. Again, social isolation is a big issue. You may have a dependence on someone else to provide everyday care, transportation, take you places. You're reliant on that person, so you want to make sure that that person doesn't take advantage of you because of that dependence. You may have an excessive worry about finances, just constantly considering how you're going to continue to live on the money, and that could raise the vulnerability factors for you becoming exploited. You may just be living paycheck to paycheck. We've all experienced that, and so that may make you have some need to feel like you need to obtain more money. And then just overwhelmed by managing your finances in general, that might cause some frequent mistakes in handling the budget or different things. Now, all of these alone may not be an issue, but these are just factors to look out for in yourself or your friends as we go forward and talk about the scams and schemes. This is just why the senior population may be more vulnerable to experiencing fraud or exploitation. All right, so let's talk about part of those common investment scams and schemes. These are things that are seen in our office, the Securities Department office, a lot. And so we're just going to talk about those and help you become aware, because this awareness we're giving you is going to empower you to be able to stop these, and again, with yourself or your friends. So one of the things you've probably heard about is Ponzi schemes, and we're going to go over all of these, but these are kind of what we call our top 5, the main schemes that we see: Ponzi schemes, unregistered persons, affinity fraud, unethical sales practices, and unregistered products. So this is just something in general that we see in our office. So let's learn a little bit more about each of these so you'll be able to spot them. In a Ponzi scheme, and probably one of the greatest ones that has been known nationally, is Bernie Madoff, and he used investor funds. It was actually originally named for Charles Ponzi, but there's never a business there. There's never a business. They sell you this investment. There's never really a business, and the only way that the older investors are getting paid is with new investor money, and then the promoter is, of course, making money. We have a great case on our InvestEd website, which I will give you later. There are a couple of documentaries that you can actually see how this has really affected Oklahomans. One of them is an individual named Bill Hickman, and you can see that he defrauded his neighbors, his friends. He ran some local TV ads, and he didn't care who he was getting the money from, and he used it to buy sea-doos, boats, cars, homes. He was vacations. There was never a business that he was using it for. He was just using it to enhance his lifestyle. Mr. Hickman is now gone to prison, and we were able to get some of that money back for investors. But the hardest thing with Ponzi schemes that we see is a lot of times the money is gone because the promoter, the person that's selling this, wasn't ever using it for a legitimate purpose. So once we go in and we stop it, become aware of it, then the money it disappears because there was never a scam. We're not getting that new money in from investors, so it's all gone. So Ponzi schemes are something we see, unfortunately, a lot in our cases. I could give many examples, but beware when somebody comes, if they ask you to invest in thing, what is the business? Maybe research the business. Obviously, we're going to talk about this more, but you'll call our office too before you make that investment. But this is one of the main things we see in all of our investments. The next big area that we see is unregistered persons. So to be able to offer or sell a security, we talked about how you had to be registered so we could go out to your office, those salespeople's office, and do some background. So they have to be registered with us. You can look them up through our department website. There's also what's called FINRA broker check, and then the SEC investment advisor public disclosure. All of that, there's links online. But what you really need to know is if you are looking at giving your money to somebody is saying they are your salesperson and they want to help you invest, that you can call our office and see if they're registered to be an investment professional. Some of the things they have to disclose, if they've ever had any actions taken against them, if they have any criminal action. It's not saying that they're bad. Part of these may have happened years ago, and you just have the right, though, before you choose that person to help you with your money, you have the right to look at their background and see if that is relevant to you, if that's something that matters to you. And if it is, you may want to go to somebody else. They've also been required to take exams, so they have to have specialized knowledge in investments. And so you're learning about that and going forward. Remember that when they are selling, whether the product itself is registered or not, most likely the people that are coming to your door should be registered with our department to sell securities, and we can help you walk through that if you need to. The next thing is affinity fraud. Affinity fraud is kind of where this fraudster targets a specific group. They attempt to blend in and gain your trust. You see this a lot. We see this sometimes. Somebody will join a church group and become a member of that church group and blend in. You may not have ever heard them before, and then they start talking about investments, and then suddenly they're asking you to give money, and they've gained your trust, and they're really just hitting that group. We have another documentary on our website that's really more of a fictionalized, but at the end you can see the video, and at the actual sales pitch, we had the scammer let somebody record him, and you see in the sales pitch he's very casually dressed. He's got on a t-shirt and then a shirt over the top of it that's unbuttoned. He's very casual. He's talking to this group. They're actually in a auto mechanics shop in the back of it. And this man, his affinity group was just this local community, this very small group of people that he was hitting, and you can tell he was dressing, he was blending in with the group that he was looking for to get their money. And I would encourage you, again, we're going to give you this site, but I would encourage you to look at this because it's amazing. He's some of the questions he's asked and the things that he says in this meeting that are just blatant lies. But at the end, the main thing he tells people is they have to get in before they leave that meeting. If they want to invest with him and how great it is going to be, they have to give him money before that meeting is over, or they can't get in. One of them asked, well, what about my child? She's not here. Well, you can give money for your child, but your child can't give me money later because the investment has to be made today. And that rush, that urgency is something that a lot of times scammers use to try to catch you off guard and make you go ahead and give that money. So that's always something to look for, and just have your guard up that you never have to make those financial decisions immediately. The next thing that we want to talk about are those investment professionals, the ones that are registered with our office. And again, we talked about they need to be registered for a reason, because we're going to be out there looking and seeing about unethical sales practices. So I have different examples. They might have borrowed money from a customer. Your investment professional should never ask you to borrow money. They are there to help you with their money, but they should never want money from you. There should be no reason that you're providing somebody that's helping you with your finances with money. You should not be giving them money. They may be recommending unsuitable investments, or and this could be anything from, if you don't want a product that's going to tie up your money, they may try to put you in a real estate investment trust that your money's going to be tied up and you can't get it out, or something along those lines. Or it may be excessive trading to generate fees. An example that I have of a recent case, this was a person that was blocked from ever acting as an investment professional again in Oklahoma. They had again, there's procedures and rules that are in place for a reason. So their firm had told them they cannot, this individual, he could not ever act as a trustee for one of his clients' accounts or have power of attorney unless that person is an immediate family member. Well, the registered person circumvented those procedures and he accepted multiple appointments and designations for a client's account. This client was 82 years old. He was not related to, and he became the successor trustee of the customer's living trust. He also received 90% of the trust assets upon the customer's death. He got that written in. He was named the personal representative of the estate, and he was appointed power of attorney and medical power of attorney. Thankfully, he did not use all of these. The firm, in their review, found out about this quickly. They then disclosed that and terminated the rep, and then the regulatory agencies were able to step in and make sure that that termination held. So that's a good example of why all these things are out there in place. This 82-year-old person may not have known that this was an issue, but we have those in place to make sure that that investment professional stays neutral, stays independent to help the person and not themselves. Next thing we're going to talk about, and the last one of just the general types of scams and schemes, is unregistered products. So we kind of mentioned this in the beginning, but unregistered products, securities have to be registered or exempt from registration before they can be legally offered or sold in the state. So to be able to offer or sell a security, it has to be registered or exempt. So you're probably going to get like this big stack of papers if it's something that somebody's coming to you about that's not your normal stock or bond. Maybe something, and it's going to have some disclosures in there and tell you why it's exempt or how it's registered. So just look at the paperwork, take your time, consider it. So these are we're going to now talk about the common investment products involved in fraudulent scams. These are just common Oklahoma investment scams that we see in different types of products that are sold. First, there's oil and gas investments. This is obviously, we're in Oklahoma, it's the land of oil and gas. And a lot of the oil and gas companies are fantastic, but in every batch, there's always somebody that's out there trying to get people's money that they don't really have to invest. They may be selling you working interest, which are just fractional interest and cost-bearing, entity interest, such as a limited partnership interest or a joint venture interest. So you just need to make sure when you're looking at these, look and make sure the well's in existence, the issuer has experience. What are the risk factors? Can all of your money go away? There's no guaranteed return of money. So just look at those and make sure how many fees are going to be applied to you. So look at that as you go forward. Life settlements are another thing that we have seen. These are what we're seeing is typically investments into an LLC membership. The LLC is purchasing a life insurance policy of a third person. In this, the investors ultimately get paid when the owner of the life insurance policy, the individual, is deceased. So what is not clear to a lot of people when they invest in these up front is that they will be required to continue to make payments of the life insurance premium. And this could go on for years. There's no guarantees on these. So if you're looking at these, make sure to know that there's many different concerns with these. There's also promissory notes. We see these a lot, promissory notes. Maybe a 9-month promissory note. I'll give you give me this $60,000, I'll give you 12% return guaranteed for 9 months, and then you'll get your premium and everything back. That has to be registered or exempt with our office. Certificates of deposits that are sold outside of banks, you also need to check and make sure what the risks are, etc. Private placement agreements, we kind of mentioned this earlier, but private placement agreements are they're a document that's going to tell you a whole bunch about it. Is it offered? It's an unregistered security that's sold to a limited pool. So it may be exempt, but you need to really look through these private placement agreements and see what they're disclosing. Who's the management? Do you know this management? You can look at these names and look on the internet, find out some more information about them. This should also tell you about the risk of loss, how you could lose your money if you chose to. The description of the business, what is this company actually doing? Do you have, and then consider, do I have the liquidity of funds to place it in this? What if this company goes belly up? I could lose everything. Look at these different things that are disclosed in that private placement before you give your money. The last thing that we've really seen is commodity investments. These are things like precious metals or cryptocurrency. I'm sure we've all heard of different types of cryptocurrencies becoming more and more familiar. Catchwords that you hear on the news, Bitcoin, Ethereum, different things. Not all of those are bad, but the regulation on them may cause issues. So I want to talk a little bit about a precious metals case that went nationwide. It was called metals.com. And there was over 100 salespeople nationwide that pushed seniors, that's who they targeted, to convert the retirement accounts into supposedly collectible coins. And the value was much lower than the price the company charged, according to law enforcement. This has been shut down. This defrauded over 1,600 investors of over $185 million. Most of these investors were required to use what's called a self-directed IRA plan. So this gets this out of like your normal investment IRA that you might have had through work or through your investment broker, and they put it into a self-directed plan. It's an IRA servicing agent. You need to be very careful if somebody suggests that you do this, because a lot of times, like in precious metals, the self-directed IRA would show that they had the full value of their investment on the statements the investors would get. However, their money really just flows through that self-directed IRA into the metals.com, and the money was never held by that self-directed IRA. So metals.com had the full access to the money, and when it was shut down, these people lost so much of their retirement funds through using this type of investment. So be careful if somebody wants you to use a self-directed IRA for your funds. Now, we've hopefully given you some ideas on what the different scams and schemes are. So let's talk about red flags, things that you might see to help you realize, hey, wait, I don't want to give my money. Promises of little or no risk. Again, everything has a risk to it. Promises of a high return. This return is, the market may be paying 4% and they're promising you 20. You need to stop and think about, well, how are they doing that and why? Is this really legitimate? High pressure sales techniques, like we talked about earlier in the example that you had to invest then before you left the room. Little or no documentation. They're not really telling you anything other than, just give me this. We're friends. I've known you for a long time. You don't need any paperwork. It's okay. You'll just give the money to me or this account that I have set up, and I'll take care of it. And then you don't get statements or anything. You need to get those statements. You need to know what's going on. And then we can't talk about this enough, the unregistered person or product. Make sure whoever is selling you that investment is registered to sell you that, and that the product is registered. So we've given you examples. This is what's going on out there. Now let's talk about ways that you can help defend yourself, ways that you can help defend your friends and family, different things that you should know. So first of all, understand investments. Learn about investing. Again, we're going to give you our website, and there's so many different videos and resources out there that will talk to you about how investing, things that you should know. Set realistic investment goals. What are your goals? How can you reach those? How can you make sure that you still have money to pay for your medicine, to pay for your home, whatever you need to pay for? Learn about your risk tolerance. How risky are you? There's actually a risk tolerance quiz that is on our website that you can take to know a little bit more. When you go to a registered person, they're also going to talk to you about your risk tolerance, about your investment goals, what you're trying to do, and they're going to ask you a whole bunch of questions and help you figure that out. But know that we have some independent resources like the insurance department. Our department is not selling anything. We're just here to help protect you. And then we've talked about the fraudulent activities, but we're going to learn how to identify those fraudulent activities. So with those red flags, with the different things that we talked about, so you won't become a victim. So let's ask some questions of these people when they come. They say, I've got this great deal for you. What questions do you need to ask? First, is this product or salesperson registered? When can the investor access the invested funds? Again, and are these funds, I know you say they're 9 months, but is that really true? How quickly can I get these funds? I may need these for something else, so I better make sure that I have the money when I need it. When will the returns be received? What fees are associated with the investment? This is huge as well. You're going to be paying some fees, like the oil and gas. Are you going to be required to make a payment? Like the life settlements, do I have to make a monthly payment, a yearly payment? Do I have to pay interest on the policies? If it's oil and gas, do I have to pay interest on the wells? Like what am I required with this investment? What is required of me? And then what are the risks? When are you going to get that money back? What could go wrong that make it where you don't get the money back? What are the terms and conditions? Does this make sense to you? Have you ever heard this before? Dig into that and see what's really going on. Is it still unusual or unrealistic? It may be, and that's something, when you've learned about those investments, when you've gone and done your research, you may really start to question it. Trust yourself when you're looking at this. These people, you have the right to ask all of these questions. You have the right to ask people, well, are you getting money for selling me this? How much are you getting? You need to ask these questions because it's your money. You need to stay in charge of your money and understand what you're doing to it and help protect yourself. That's why these questions are so important. You also need to review all the documentation you've received. You're going to receive it and review it. This is those statements we were talking about earlier, any of the paperwork up front, anything. You need that paperwork. Don't say, well, I paid an investment guy, so that's what I pay him for. I'm not looking at it. I appreciate that. I understand that. And part of the time you may not understand those documents, but maybe take them to another third party to help you if you don't understand them. Again, this is your money. You've worked hard for it. You need to stay in control of it. So make sure you've received and reviewed all those documentations. Review your account statements. We have some good trainings on that, and we can help you with that if you have some questions on different things to look for with account statements. I didn't go into all of them today, but there's different things to look at. Is that your name? Is that your broker's name? Why is it coming from them? Is the statement correct? Is there money that's been taken out of that you don't know why? Look at all of that information and just make sure that there's great resources everywhere. Look at the fees. Wait, that's a lot of fees. Should that be that high? Call and ask about it. Is it suddenly on margin? Are you getting fees for that? Do you even know what that means? Look at that income summary. Does that look right? I can't tell you how many times we've talked to people. Well, do you get your statements? Yeah. Do you look at them? No, I just throw them in the pile. I figure my investment guy will, or girl, or whoever will tell me if there's an issue. Well, no, you need to look at those statements. They're coming to you for a reason. You need to look at those and make sure, does that statement look altered? Does it have any issues with it? Just, is the statement period correct? Is that right? Have you really had that investment for that long? Look at those things on there and just help. It won't take you long, especially after you have started looking at them, but just take the time and become familiar with those account statements and know what you're looking at. And like I said, if you don't feel comfortable looking at these, maybe consider seeking professional advice. You can always go to your financial person, but also you can go to another attorney, an accountant, somebody outside of that salesperson to look at that information to make sure it makes sense. So let's talk a little bit more about protecting yourself, what you can do, how you can protect yourself. Again, reach out to someone you trust. If you may not feel comfortable with dealing with your finances anymore, reach out to someone you can trust and make sure that you are always aware that salespeople will prey on your emotions. So always take a deep breath, take a moment. Can you trust this person? Is there somebody else that you can look at? Have you looked into this person's background? Do you really know who they are? Now, this one is one that it always saddens me that we even have to talk about, but in times of crisis, maybe you've just lost a spouse, different things, you want to be grieving that person. You don't want to think about your money. You don't want that to have to be an issue. But we have had cases where investment professionals have contacted the grieving spouse immediately after their spouse has passed away. They even went out of state with that person to the funeral. And the night before the funeral, they talked to this surviving widow who was in her 80s, and they convinced her to change her whole investment plan that night and put her in all of these products that were never right for them, were never suitable. That person is now barred from the industry, by the way, that followed them up there, but this did happen. It could happen to a lot of people. So you just need to take that time to grieve and don't worry about those finances. Don't let that personal tragedy worse. Remember, your ability could be inhibited at this time to make an informed investment decision. You're thinking about other things. You're thinking about how your life has changed. So just take that breath, take that moment to decide. It also, if they're trying to get you to do this immediately right after this, it's going to reduce the time you have to get all the facts, all those things we just talked about, that you need to get the paperwork, look through it. There's no reason why you should have to make a decision immediately while you're in that time of crisis. Now we're going to talk about reporting. So an interesting fact on senior abuse, only 1 of 44 financial exploitation cases is reported. That's right, only 1 of 44 cases. Abused seniors are 3 times more likely to die prematurely, and elder abuse victims are 4 times more likely to go to a nursing home. So that's why it's so important to take what we've learned, what we've talked about, and report. So let's talk about what we're going to do when we're reporting. First of all, you're going to say, well, do you suspect something? So maybe you don't know, but maybe your friend or neighbor is acting differently. There's suddenly somebody around that's never been around them before. They're no longer talking to their family. You're concerned that this person may have got too much control. You can always consider talking to the victim and trying to get some information there. They're your friend, they're your family member. Consider talking to them first. And when you do, try to gather as much information as possible. Who is this person? Are you giving them your money? Are you, what's going on? Why do they suddenly have so much control? After you've got this, if you still have that feeling that you should report it, then you need to. There's a different, as we talked about earlier, elder exploitation and fraud, you're required to report to one of 2 places for sure. The first is Adult Protective Services. That's here in Oklahoma. I put the abuse hotline number on here. They will walk you through how to assist that person. So this is the Adult Protective Services number. You also can report to law enforcement if you find it more immediate danger. Things law enforcement will probably ask you is the name and age and address of the victim, full description of who the suspect is if you have it, description of the incident, location of the car. This is not a laundry list, but they're going to walk you through this, and just all of this is being done to try to help that potential victim. But remember, ultimately, if somebody is in immediate danger, you always need to call 911. Now, where does our office come in? Here's our contact number, Oklahoma Department of Securities, 405-280-7700. That is our general number. You can most likely, if it's during our working hours, you'll be transferred to somebody or leave a detailed message and we'll get back to you. You can also report online at our website, securities.ok.gov. Our office is there and we work closely with law enforcement and Adult Protective Services, but you can also call us directly. Say you may not think it's abuse or exploitation, but you really think that there's somebody that's just reached out and offered you something, or offered a friend something, or you hear a friend come over and say, look at this return I'm going to get, it's 20%, this is magical. And you look at the documents and you've learned today that this just doesn't quite make sense. You can stop and say, hey, let's call, let's talk to the securities department, let's report this and see. This person is not registered to sell securities. This product says on its face on this private placement memorandum that's an unregistered security, but they're still trying to get my money. Let me call this number and talk. We are very good. We try to get back to you within 24 hours at the longest period. That'd be if you left the message the night before, but we try to return all phone calls as quickly as possible. And we'll talk to you and we'll look at it and we'll help you find out if they're registered, the different things about the person. We're there to help you. So the last thing that is on this site is the website for our investor education outreach. You can get through this through the securities.ok.gov, but you can also go directly to our investor education outreach, which is www.investedok.org. This website has a lot of information. Those documentaries I've been talking to you about, they're all there. That Investor risk test, it's there. The risk assessment, it's there. There's videos on different things. Have you ever wondered what PE stands for in relation to stock, what the PEG ratio is? All of those videos are there. We also have a investment program for high school students that is called our STARS program, students tracking and researching the stock market. So you'll see some information about that there as well. All of this information is free to you. We're happy for you to use it. Again, we're a non-biased source. We are just there to protect Oklahomans and help protect you and your retirement account. So I encourage you to visit this website. Our documentaries are good. Just for time purposes today, I didn't want to spend the time showing you those, but they are there for you to look at. All right, and ultimately, I'm about to go back to Ray, but what I want to leave you with, that I know it may sound a little cheesy, but it truly is. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So remember that when you're looking at these investments, that's the ultimate thing. This just may sound way too good to be true. So remember this as you go forward and look at your investments. I am now going to stop sharing my screen and see if there are any questions and have a little chat with Ray.
All right, thank you very much. That was great. I actually do have quite a few questions for you. You had mentioned about products being registered or exempt. Can you explain a little bit about why would a product be exempt? What are the things about a product that would make it eligible to be exempt? And is that a warning sign? Should we steer clear of exempt products?
That's a great question. So as all of you know, us attorneys, we like to have legalese, but there are certain products that can meet certain requirements. In Oklahoma, for example, there's a oil and gas exemption that you have to be in the business, or maybe the product is a federally registered security, so it doesn't have to be registered with the state. What it really means is, I wouldn't call it a complete no, I can't do that, but I would want to know more information about it if I were you. It can only be limited to 25 people to be sold, and there can't be any commission paid to your sales agent. So if your sales agent tells you they're receiving money, that may throw up a red flag. Well, wait. So our office can help you if those come to you, the exempt products. It doesn't mean that they're bad. Sometimes they're perfectly great. That's how some businesses are funded. That's how some restaurants in Oklahoma have started, through some private offerings. But part of it may also require that you have a certain net income, be considered what's called an accredited investor. And that would mean you have a certain amount of money that you have that will cushion you if you invest in that. And there's requirements related to that should be explained in those documents, in that exemption. So.
Okay, great. Regarding where these people are being accessed most frequently, you talked about how someone could show up at your door, that there could be people calling you on the telephone about investments versus now the internet. Typically, where do you guys see, when you're dealing with all these reports and stuff, is it typically someone showed up at my door, or I went to a presentation, or where are you guys seeing most of this occurring?
That's a great question. I would say pre-pandemic, it was a lot of presentations, a lot of free lunch seminars, or marketing you might have gotten in the mail, that you think you're there to learn about one thing at this free lunch, and suddenly by the end they're selling you an investment, or they're wanting to come back to your house. We had a big case a couple of years ago that they actually got all of the investors' names through a mailing that they had sent out. The investors would call and say they wanted a estate plan set. They would come get the information for the estate plan and then call them back with the investment after they saw how many assets they have. So that's always an approach. Phone calls. I am certain that everybody that has talked in this series has told you don't need to answer that phone when it rings every time, because just trust me, you don't. Phone calls are also still very relevant. Online solicitation has become greater as we've been at home more. As you get those emails, those spoof emails, spam emails, just be careful what you're looking at.
Okay, then you talked about the videos, and they're great videos. People, if you're watching this, if you've not gone on that InvestEd website to watch those videos, I encourage you to do so. They're very professional, they're very informative, and it really does put a face on this issue. But one of the things that I recall from watching all of those videos is the investigation that the Department of Securities does. And it's very hands-on. There's a lot of going through records and papers and stuff. How has the pandemic impacted the Department of Security's ability to do these investigations?
That's a great point. And first of all, thank you for the confirmation that our videos are good. But yeah, our investigation process, and you'll kind of see it. We talk to the investors, which we have still been able to do. Sometimes we've set up Zoom calls with the investors. Sometimes we've talked on the phone. We haven't done as many face-to-face, obviously, but with virtual, we're still able to function and get those interviews done. We have done some face-to-face, maybe sitting at different rooms of a conference table with their mask on. However, that investor has felt comfortable talking to us. We also get in bank records. We get in tons of bank records. In some cases, it's 72 different accounts of bank records that we go through. And we have investigators in our office that are great. They're financial experts. They get all of that information in, they analyze it, and we can see where the investor money came in and what it ultimately went to spend. Is it a Ponzi scheme? Was there a legitimate business? So we still have all of that. We have our examiners have done a lot more virtually to look at exams and look at paperwork. That's very easy these days because now more things are stored electronically, so they can still get that paperwork in for clients. But we're still doing a lot. The pandemic has actually not slowed our investigation process down much at all. So.
Okay, well, that's good. And you mentioning the Ponzi schemes. One of the things that I recall, as you said, the Ponzi schemes are basically people are investing money, and the money that they get is actually from other investors. It's not actually, there's no actual business. And some people may think, well, as long as I wasn't one of the last ones to join, then I'm probably okay. Isn't it correct that when they finally discover these Ponzi schemes and they start unraveling this mess, that people who have received payments as a result of this Ponzi scheme may be required to repay some of that money?
That is correct, and it's very, very hard for us to make that decision. But you'll see if you look at one of our documentaries, it's the one that focuses in Crescent. But the net winners, as we called them, the people that had got the most from the Ponzi scheme, those early investors, were actually required by the courts to pay that money back. So they may have built homes, they may have used it for something else, and they were required to pay those investments back. So that's a great point when you're considering this and you're like, wow, I'm making this 20% interest and I don't care how they're getting it. Well, you may ultimately care how they're getting it. So that's why you need to research and see, is there really a business? What's going on? Because ultimately you could be responsible to have to pay that money back.
Okay. As far as you talked about the meetings where people come and they'll give you a meal and they want you to invest in their product and they're pressuring you to invest right then. On my end of the situation, when we're talking about Medicare, there are very specific guidelines from CMS that say that if a person is there doing a education seminar about a Part C Medicare Advantage plan, that they actually they can't do a sales call. They can't actually take a person's enrollment form or anything like that at that same meeting. They have to set up a separate meeting. I know that you said people shouldn't invest at that same meeting. Are there any regulations that say they can't take? Like if someone were to make that kind of a pitch and say, you got to invest today, do they need to report that? And who would they report it to?
That's a great question. Yes, the ultimate answer is yes. Report it to our office, the Securities Department, 405-280-7700. Report that, because most likely that person is not registered. If they were registered, they would know that they should have then maybe got interest from that client, then set up a meeting and talked about those things like your risk assessment, your financial objectives, the different things you really want done with your money. And then they should have set up a whole plan with you. They should have had a meeting to make sure whatever they were putting you in was suitable. So if they're making you invest that day at that meeting, odds are that person is not who you think they are. That's not who you want to give your money to. So call us immediately. We'll do some homework for you.
Okay, and as far as those people, the ones that show up at your door, and you talked about how they need to be registered and some of that stuff. Are there any credentials that if they were to show up to talk to you that you should be asking to see? A badge or a tattoo, whatever it might be, but You know, is there something that would tell you this person is legitimate?
That's a great question, and it's so hard, right? Because you'll see so many people throw out these different, like, I'm a certified financial something something, and you're like, oh well, that's got to be legitimate. The things that I'm an insurance agent. Well, does that mean you can sell securities? Does that mean you can deal with my investments? So there's not a badge, there's nothing, but there are license, and we can get to those easily online through broker check, through that SEC investment advisor disclosure. Both of those are linked to our website, the securities website, or you can call us and see if that person is even registered to be selling you a security, if they're registered to be talking to you about that product.
We had another question that came in, and it was pretty interesting because, you know, we're all watching these crime shows and we see, you know, Dateline on Friday nights and stuff. I don't know what involvement the Department of Securities might have in a situation like this, but do you guys get involved? If there's a situation where somebody is deceased and they're investigating, maybe they had a large life insurance policy or they had a lot of investments or something like that, is there any role that the Department of Securities plays in those types of situations where someone may have been killed and they think that there could have been other reasons?
Well, I can answer that to the extent that obviously we wouldn't be there for the who done it. We do work with law enforcement. We do. So if they had some concerns about whether what had happened to the money, different things, we might become involved in that. If there was some concerns about how it was sold to them or how they ended up, or suddenly they passed away and all their money's gone, we may be contacted, but ultimately that would be law enforcement's call on whether or not to contact our office. We have civil and administrative powers within our office. We do not have criminal jurisdiction.
Okay. Is there any particular types of fraud that you got that's going on in Oklahoma right now? What are the big things that you guys are seeing at this time that people need to be aware of?
You know, that's a great, and it kind of goes back to, there's always the standards. There's the oil and gas, there's the life settlements. Right now we are looking at some other types of investments. Our recent cases have, I have filed one that was a lady that had gotten money from friends, and then from online resources, that she told them they were investing in housing scams, or housing. It was a housing scam, but she told them they were investing in housing and housing development. There was no housing development. She is actually facing criminal charges in Houston for both of her her Oklahoma and then Texas cells. She was really using it just to, we again got the bank records and could see it was just for her lifestyle. She had a lifestyle blog online, and she was telling people how to get this money. Of course, then she would meet those people and just take their money. So that was ultimately her lifestyle blog. How to live like her was just to steal from people. So that case has been filed recently. There's also, we've had some oil and gas cases. Still, there was really no wells, nothing there. So those are the main things that we're seeing that are public at this time. I should have also mentioned that part of our cases that we're investigating, we can't talk about the details until they become public. So if you do call us and you have a concern, everything you say to us will remain confidential, unless we have to use it to take an action. So that may help alleviate part of your concerns as well. We have to keep everything very, very confidential until we use it publicly.
Okay. So as we've talked about all of this stuff in your presentation and these questions and everything, we always refer to them as the bad guys and stuff. Is it possible that in some of these situations, someone might be violating the regulations or the laws and not meaning to? That sometimes someone meaning well or thinking they've got a great idea and they really are trying to help somebody might find themselves in a position of violating the securities regulations and such. And if so, if someone has something like that, if they want to look into getting investors or something, where do they go to find out what do they need to do to make sure they're staying within the law?
That's a great question. And it does happen. We have cases and we try to work with those people, but by the time they get to me in enforcement, maybe a little too late for those people because they've already violated the law. So I would recommend, if you're considering raising money from anybody, getting money from anybody, contact competent legal counsel outside the department. Can't be your legal counsel, but contact somebody and ask them how to correctly raise those funds, what you need to do to make sure that you are in compliance with the securities laws before you get money from investors.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. Appreciate you joining us today. That was really good information, and you know that I'll be picking on you again next year, so just get ready for it. But
I'm excited.
everyone, thank you everybody for joining us for our webinar today. Wanted to remind you, we have one more left in the series. It will be next Thursday at 10 a.m. and we'll have Frederick Lohman from the National Insurance Crime Bureau that's going to be joining us. He'll be kind of the newcomer to our program for this year, and he's going to be talking about contractor fraud. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Mr. Lohman has to offer us. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week.